October 1907. The American financial system is hours from collapse, and the United States has no central bank to save it. What it has is one private citizen. He summons the heads of New York's trust companies into his personal library, locks the doors, and puts the key in his pocket. By 4:45 in the morning, this man has decided which of America's banks will live and which will die. He has no government office. No one elected him. Everything he did that night was completely legal. How much power are we talking about? In 1913, Congress finally added it up. Companies holding board seats from Morgan's inner network controlled $22.2 billion in resources. To put that number in perspective at the time, it was more than the assessed value of all property in the 22 states west of the Mississippi River. Everything, every farm, every building, every acre 22 states' worth was worth less than what flowed through one banker's network of boardrooms. Rockefeller had oil, Vanderbilt had railroads, Carnegie had steel. Morgan built the strangest empire of them all because he never really owned any of it. This is the mechanics of the man who controlled everything while owning almost nothing. And the vehicle this time is not a commodity, it is other people's money. Unlike every other figure in this series, Morgan was born rich. Hartford, Connecticut, 1837. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, ran one of the most powerful American banking houses in London, the pipeline through which European capital flowed into a young, cash-hungry United States. Pierpont was trained for the family business like a crown prince, schooled in Switzerland and Germany, fluent in French and German, gifted at mathematics, and drilled in one lesson. Above all others, a banker's only real asset is his reputation. So the origin story here is not rags to riches, it is an apprenticeship in power. In his 20s, Morgan worked the New York end of his father's transatlantic network. In 1871, he became the Morgan in Drexel, Morgan and Company, and by the 1880s he had found his life's work. America's railroads, the biggest industry in the country, were drowning in debt, overbuilt, and constantly going bankrupt. European investors were losing fortunes. Somebody had to impose order on the chaos. Morgan appointed himself. And that brings us to the vehicle. Every empire in this series runs on one machine that mints the money. Rockefeller had the trust. Vanderbilt had the railroad itself. Morgan's machine was subtler and in some ways more powerful than either, the syndicate. Watch carefully how it works, because this single mechanism is the entire fortune. Step 1, a railroad goes broke, which in the 1880s and 90s they did constantly. Step 2, Morgan Syndicate steps in with other people's money pooled from banks and European investors and refinances the wreck. Debts cut, costs slashed, warring managers fired. Step 3, the syndicate collects fees and takes its payment in stock. And Step 4, the masterstroke. The restructured company's shares go into a voting trust controlled by Morgan's men, and a more partner takes a seat on the board. Do this for 20 years and you do not own American industry. You do something better, you chair it. They even gave the process a name, Morganization. The scale this reached is hard to believe. By 1913, Morgan's inner group held 105 directorships across 32 transportation systems railroads with a combined 150,200 miles of track, capitalized at nearly $12 billion. That is enough railroad to circle the earth 6 times, answering to one bank's boardroom votes. And railroads were only the beginning. In 1892, Morgan financed the merger that created General Electric. His firm midwifed International Harvester and AT&T. In total, his bank organized or reorganized more than 20 railroads and stood behind many of the corporations that defined the American century. Then, in 1901, came the deal that stunned the world. Morgan bought out Andrew Carnegie, the most efficient steelmaker on earth, the man from our last episode, for roughly $492 million. Then he fused Carnegie Steel with 9 other companies into United States Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation in history, capitalized at $1.4 billion, controlling about 2/3 of American steel. For scale, the entire United States federal government spent about $517 million that year. Morgan had assembled a private company nearly 3 times that size, without building a single furnace himself. Pause on the difference between Morgan and every tycoon who came before him, because this is the heart of the episode. Rockefeller and Carnegie owned their empires, the wells, the mills, and their fortunes were locked in equity. Morgan's game was the opposite. He put up other people's money, took his cut in fees and stock, and kept control through board seats and voting trusts. One industry can crash. The banker who sits above all industries collects either way. Ownership makes you rich. Control makes you sovereign. But control of the boardrooms was only half the empire. The other half is what made Morgan something no businessman has been before or since. Twice, when the United States government itself ran out of money and out of options, it called him. Act 3, the lender of last resort. 1895. By law, the Treasury was required to hold $100 million in gold to back the currency, and a depression-driven gold drain had nearly emptied the vault. The United States of America was days from effective default. President Grover Cleveland, who found the idea of depending on a private banker humiliating, ran out of alternatives and let Morgan into the White House. Morgan's syndicate delivered 3.5 million ounces of gold in exchange for a 30-year bond issue. Within months, the reserve stood at $107 million. The Republic had been refinanced like one of his railroads. 12 years later, the favor was needed again, and this time the entire system was on fire. October 1907, a failed attempt to corner a copper stock set off runs on the trust company's shadow banks that held 5% cash against deposits versus 25% for national banks. When rumors touched the Knickerbocker Trust, one of New York's largest, depositors tore $8 million out of it in under 3 hours. By noon on October 22nd, the Knickerbocker was gone. The stock market was already down nearly 50% from its peak, and there was no Federal Reserve. There was a 70-year-old man with a head cold. Followed was the most extraordinary 2 weeks in American financial history, run from a private library on Madison Avenue. Morgan triaged the system like a battlefield surgeon. This trust dies, that one lives. On October 24th, the stock exchange came within minutes of shutting down. Morgan summoned the bank presidents and extracted $23.6 million in about 10 minutes to keep it open. John D. Rockefeller deposited $10 million to steady the banks. The Treasury itself placed $25 million with New York banks through Morgan's coalition. The government was acting through him. And then the legendary night, November 2nd, into the small hours of the 3rd, with the crisis still smoldering, Morgan gathered the city's bank and trust presidents, a crowd of some 120 men, in his library to force a final settlement. He locked the doors. He pocketed the key. Nobody was leaving until the strong agreed to save the weak. At 4:45 in the morning, they signed a $25 million rescue pool for the ailing trusts. Within days, the panic burned out. Congress had done nothing. The president had watched. One private citizen had performed, alone, the function of a central bank. Now for the part the legend leaves out, because every rescue had a price, and Morgan always collected. During the panic, U.S. Steel bought the Tennessee Coal and Iron Company for about $30 million, a strategic prize Morgan's men acquired at the bottom, after President Roosevelt personally agreed not to raise antitrust objections. The 1895 gold syndicate booked a profit Morgan flatly refused to disclose to Congress. And the deeper cost was structural, a system where one network held the board seats of banks, railroads, and industry was a system with no real competition, and the country paid for the panic anyway, with industrial output collapsing 17% in 1908. The surgeon saved the patient. He also billed him. America noticed. In 1912, Congress hauled the old man before the Pujo Committee to answer for what the press called the money trust. The committee's report counted 341 directorships across 112 corporations, $22.2 billion in resources under one network. The lawyer Louis Brandeis put the number in words every farmer could feel. On the stand, Morgan gave the answer he had been raised on since Hartford. Asked whether credit was based on money or property, he replied, No, sir, the first thing is character. Money cannot buy it, he said, because a man I do not trust could not get money from me on all the bonds in Christendom. It was the creed of the whole empire. His true collateral had never been gold, but the belief that his word was final. 3 months after testifying, John Pierpont Morgan died in his sleep in Rome, March 31st, 1913. Wall Street flew its flags at half-mast. Then came the twist that stunned everyone. When the estate was tallied, the most powerful financier on earth left about $68 million, plus an art collection worth some $50 million, roughly $80 million in total, by biographer Ron Chernow's estimate. Call it around $2 billion in today's money. Carnegie's exit had been 6 times larger. John D. Rockefeller, worth close to $1 billion himself, reportedly marveled. And to think, he was not even a rich man. That is the final proof of the vehicle. The fortune was never the point. The fees bought him a fine living. The control bought him the country. So what transfers to you from the man who was the bank? First, control beats ownership. Morgan got paid on assets he never owned. The modern versions are called carried interest, management fees, and board control. Second, liquidity is power. The man with cash when everyone else is desperate names his own terms in 1895, in 1907, and in every crash since. Third, reputation is collateral. Morgan lent against character, and markets still do. Fourth, the warning. An empire built on one man's word dies with the man. 9 months after Morgan's death, Congress created the Federal Reserve, the machine that replaced him. Institutions outlive kings. Morgan proved you could rule American industry with a ledger instead of a factory. The next man in this series did the opposite. He bolted the factory to a moving chain, cut the price of his product in half, and put the whole country on wheels. Next week, Henry Ford, the farm boy whose assembly line became the most ruthless money machine of the 20th century. Subscribe so you do not miss it, and check the description for our other channels. See you in the next one.